Real estate investing can bring big reward and big risks. So know your risks. Welcome to the Real Estate Risk Report, the show for real-world insight on real estate investment risk. Now, here's your host, Lance Pederson.
Thank you for joining the Real Estate Risk Report. I'm your host, as always, Lance Pederson. So today we are on episode 2 of our 3-part series, which I've been super excited about. And I hope you all enjoyed episode 1 on Monday or for whenever you have consumed this. So today we got JP Newman with Thrive FP based in Austin, Texas. He's flying solo today. We're going to kind of go down a few clicks. So if you haven't watched episode 1 of this, go ahead back and listen to that. We had JP's business partner, Adrian, on, and they sort of shared their origin story at Thrive and how they came up and renamed the business to Thrive FP and what the FP stood for and why they put that in there. And, you know, for profit, for purpose. And, there's more to what they're doing in the real estate space than just, making money. And so we're going to kind of further that discussion today and maybe, drill in and probably go a couple different directions. But we're really, for those of you who are listening who are passive investors, I think it's important that, you understand that, you can help make a difference, right? And where you allocate your hard-earned capital and that, you of course hope that capital will help you grow your nest egg and those sorts of things. But, you need to understand that you also can help make a difference and change people's lives through those investments that you make, while also making money, and that you do have a voice, even if it is $50, $100, $250, $500,000 at a time. You get to decide who you allocate your capital to. At the end of the day, there's, in this space, there's some sort of deal sponsor, whether they're a fund manager or a, multifamily owner operator, a private lender or whatever. You get to decide where those dollars go, and the people who are managing those funds one way or another, understanding what they're about and how they manage those assets and make money. So you have a voice. And I think that our hope by the end of this episode between JP and I is that you begin to use that voice. And on the flip side, for those of you who are kind of peeking in and listening, that might be multifamily owner operators or any other sort of deal sponsors, realizing that there are ways that you can accomplish both and have it all, right? You can impact people's lives and community and have purpose beyond that, whether it's environmental or their social impact or, those sorts of things, while still making money. So with that said, JP, let's sort of just do a bit of a reset here on, kind of the case for why you can do it both, especially, looking at it from the, why you can do it both and actually end up making more money than you would have otherwise. I think that's what people don't think that's possible, or somehow think that you can't have those both at the same time.
No, absolutely. I appreciate you having me on, Lance. We call it as like doing good and doing well. And I guess the first question I'd say is, why do good? I mean, I guess that's a big question. A lot of people are like, this is just business. Isn't this just a transaction? Like, I'm just trying to get to my 14 IRR. Should anything else really matter? Yeah. And I think that thinking has served a long time. That, as you know, there's so many webinars, 12 months to $1 million. Everything's kind of very goal oriented. It's a very Western kind of linear viewpoint of how we kind of look at things. And I think maybe for a long time it served business to maybe be very goal focused, because as human beings, if you don't have a goal, how do you know where you're going? I mean, there's a lot to be said for having this very linear goal. But I think if you actually look at where we're at right now in history, where we're at with people's taste, the next generation down and what we're looking at, I think more and more people are almost demanding as a consumer more meaning and more mission in the product. And if it's not there, you're going to lose them to someone else. So I think what maybe used to be a luxury of like social impact or doing good as kind of like this luxurious thing and nice to think about. Yeah, I give on Sundays, but today's Monday. So there's this difference between Sunday and Monday. I think we're really in a really different place right now. I think if you look at the political, economic, and just kind of like what we've been through, I would argue that actually waking up as an investor or a sponsor to the social impact is actually maybe crucial to the ultimate survival of your business. So I would say it's no longer this nice thing off to the side. And I can go into more detail. I mean, obviously, I think what we're seeing essentially is that consumers kind of know, they can smell the difference. You're kind of seeing the uprising. You're seeing kind of this young generation, whether it's political, racial, we're seeing all these different things out there. And then look at the rent protests that we're seeing,
Yeah.
after we, just here in Texas, after pipes were bursting, you have a lot of angry people who feel like they have not been taken good care of by their government or by different places. And some of it's fair and some of it's not fair, but the anger is really there. I mean, look at the protest across the West Coast in your town,
Yeah.
uh, over rent. And these signs are coming up. We don't think we should pay rent. Like, where does that anger come from? Like, you don't think you should pay rent. And the anger is, there's a lot of, again, it's not always the owner's fault, but there's a lot of feeling from tenants of frustration that they're kind of always getting they're not getting their fair share. That in a way, they're always last.
Mm.
And I can tell you in Texas, we actually had tenants protesting after our snowstorm. There was this anger. And even though we were sitting there fixing their plumbing, there was such an anger. And it starts with a couple tenants, and the next thing you know, the news is there, and you're like, we literally had to do a pretty big concession to make them happy. And was it a fair concession? Not really, but there's anger right now. And I think part of the anger is it's a system that tends to be, particularly our system, if we're going to be completely honest about workforce housing, is we have a system that tends to be extractive towards our residents versus accretive. And I know it's the dirty secret, and I know nobody really wants to talk about it. I've walked 50,000 units, Lance, in my lifetime. I hear the way the brokers speak. I hear the way other owners speak. And it's not even like malicious. It's not ill-willed. It's just an industry that's been frozen in time and a lot of its practices over many, many years. So again, it's not pointing the finger, but unfortunately, it does come to where it's this feeling of sometimes the residents are called pieces of traffic. How many pieces of traffic did we get this week? In a way, it takes the humanity out of the actual community. And I think it's very easy to start to think of these residents as a commodity. And the commodity are these warm bodies in an 800-foot, box, which is essentially all the services that companies like Thrive and us offer. But I think that commodity and that mentality, whether it's been innocent or not, is part of the problem that we all need to wake up to, whether we're an investor or an owner. And again, I can make the social impact reason, I can just make the business reason as things are. I mean, we're seeing it in front of us right now.
Yeah, and you're right. And I think that's just it, is that human beings are. I mean, they're extremely intuitive, right? I mean, that's part of how we've survived and sort of stand at the top of the food chain, right? And I think that especially when many people, as we've talked about, they're sort of teetering on. So when you put yourself in the shoes of the residents of many of these communities, is that from their perspective, they've made a conscious decision to try to be a good citizen, to go out and get a job and work hard, right? And do those things. And they know that many of them do. This is the other dirty little secret. They could just quit and go on welfare and get all these government handouts. Like, they're not that far away from doing it, right? But there's this pride. There's like this, yeah, but like, I don't want to be like that. But at the same time, as they're trying to do that, they feel all this, oppression from these, the perceived or real, whatever, right? They feel like they're being oppressed, like there's options being taken from them, that they don't have a say. And then when you've got this, this extractive, the place where you live, you feel like all they're trying to do is extract something from you. You're the new owner, and now all of a sudden you coming in, and now you got a metered water, you got like whatever it is, you name it, it's some other thing. Well, we're raising the rent $75. Like, that's the stuff that just pisses them off.
And there's more to it. It's the whole ecosystem. When you think about in America, when we say 41% of Americans can't afford a $500 emergency, 41%. And then so in that ecosystem, it really is what you'd call the blue collar, which we see as the missing middle. It's really the missing middle class, because as we know, because we've had lack of any real wage growth, what really has happened is you've got a lot of Americans. You're talking, I don't remember the exact number, but you're 41% of the apartment community. I forget how many people we have in apartment communities, but this is like 50, 60 million people. This is not like a small amount of people that basically they're in a system where if you're going to payday advance, and there's more payday advances in America than there are McDonald's, and they're charging you 35 or 40% because you can't even make, you're trying to just juggle your rent and you're just trying to like, you know, so it's not even just the apartment owner, it's really the
Right.
whole system of even
Yeah.
how you get paid, how you have to borrow money. You're always kind of you're living just paycheck to paycheck and you can't get ahead. And we're specifically talking about the people, the policemen, the firemen, the teachers, yes, first and second generation minorities. I mean, you're talking about the people that really, and by the way, that is the backbone of America. They, without them, there is no America. That is the workforce. That is the
Yep.
maintenance person at the hospital. That is like literally the support for all of us. The call it the $25,000 to $70,000
Yep.
person that literally we don't get to have America without that backbone. So it's a pretty important niche, and they're not homeless, so they don't qualify for a lot of the programs out there. They're just kind of in that spot of just making it, which again, you're talking about a large portion of Americans. This isn't like when people talk about homeless, it's a horrible problem, but it's a much smaller problem than what we're talking about here with the missing middle.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's just it. And I think that's where for, you and I, before we hit record, we're just saying that like, hey, you know, our lot is our lot. Like we happen to be in the real estate investment management businesses, right? Like this is where we stand. And so, sort of the dominant property type within ours is multifamily. And of that, there's far more units that kind of fit in that are occupying or serving as the homes and the roofs over the heads of, the missing middle, right? Those who are out there, like you said, delivering the packages and, teaching our children and those sorts of things. So yeah, I mean, the world there's so many problems, right? Like, I mean, it can be overwhelming, right? So that's why we're honing in here to say, at the end of the day, a company like Thrive, they're in business. You guys are business owners. This is the business you happen to be in. So you can apply this to anything, whether you're a marketing and branding agency or whatever. Like the point here is to say they're not mutually exclusive things, right? And understanding that, and to your point, to attract talent in the future, right? Because the next generation of people, they do put mission is very important to them. They want to do meaningful work. Just the way that their worldviews are changing. And now you've got these dynamics, like them or not, as you said, it's just that they're present, man. And people are, I mean, look at what happened even with like Donald Trump. No one ever would have thought that like he could have been elected. But when you think of how he did end up getting elected, it came on the back of a lot of angst, right? And that's that angst that's there, that anger that's there, because they're saying, what are they saying? You aren't listening to us.
Yeah.
You're not listening to us. And we happen to be in a country that's all about free speech. So, when it is what it is. You got to look at it and say, this is what's happening. Okay. So now how do you turn it around instead of railing against it and getting all bent out of shape because, these punks are, protesting and they're setting things on fire and, like, okay, slow down, right? Slow down for a minute. Like,
well,
okay, let's go back to the humanity thing. Like,
right.
How can we help, reverse that?
And I think this is really important because before anyone goes, oh God, this is like a goody two shoe show. Like, here's the thing: Thrive FP is for purpose and for profit. So I also have investors. Yeah. I have a fiduciary at the end of the day. I have a fiduciary to create a market or above market return. So like I have the same pressure. So this is not this conversation that we're having, Lance, is not about like how do we do good as a nonprofit. This is a for-profit company. But the point is that we're finding after 11 years of doing this, and as we keep growing and launch the nonprofit, is that actually all it really takes, it takes a little bit of mission, purpose, and some creativity, and actually just getting in that mindset that actually I will do better. By creating stronger communities, I'm going to have better resident retention, and resident retention creates higher returns. So it's kind of like by just putting this attention in, you're not, I mean, you can argue there's the humanity reason to do it, but there's a really compelling business case that really creating these amazing communities with creativity, mission and purpose, and really communicating to the residents that as an owner or as an investor, if you're an investor backing an owner, this is an organization that really takes pride in its communities, not just by lip service, not just because we call them sparkling pools or fabulous laundry facilities, but we actually, like, people know. And I could tell you 10 different things of how it's really not that hard. And residents get it. They can feel it from the manager. They can feel it from the staff. They can feel it how they deal with problems. They can feel it with how they're welcomed. Little touches, like, there's lots of little touches that go beyond standard management today. So this really is, if you want to make more money as an investor, or if you want to have a better return as a sponsor, this might be your most important episode that you have, even though it
Yeah.
may not look at it on the surface.
Yeah. And I agree. And that's what goes back to that, just understanding that these people, they are humans. They're not just numbers. It's not just traffic. It's not just doors. It's not, those are inanimate objects. These are human beings who live inside and dwell, and they dwell in close vicinity to others. So it is, whether you realize it or not, it's a community. And what you need to understand, like these people, it doesn't take much. It's their intuition, like you said, JP, that they sense it. They go, these owners are different. Like they do care, right? Like they're listening. And that's, a lot of it's this listening thing. It's just saying, listen, what are they saying? What are they asking for? Because I think a lot of people say, you're giving us these amenities that we don't necessarily care about. And I think that's what you guys honed in on, is that you're saying, well, wait a minute, this is the nurse who's working 2 jobs and a single mother. That's who's living in the unit. Why don't we do after school care? Right. Because to her, that's like, okay, I've got all these options on apartments.com, whatever, boom, amenity, after school care. Right. Like, that's on the short list, right? I'm showing up there. Right. And then you go there, and then the person, the apartment manager meets with them and, has this different way about them, like what's important, how we're managing this community. They pick up on that after school care, boom, you get the, all things being equal, right? They're going to spend their money there. Now they get in there.
Or during a pandemic, in this case, there's a nonprofit, which I know it's going to be in your next episode, that actually is helping, with people. We didn't do all buildings. We kind of, the nonprofit was looking at buildings that knew that they were really at risk. A lot of residents would be at risk of having zero health insurance. So why not partner with, a large group like Teladoc, the largest telemedicine group in the nation, I think the world actually, and just during this time, maybe during normal times, you subsidize it, or the nonprofit subsidize it, or you just help out, or you maybe just offer it. I mean, like there's no way to do this right or wrong. Maybe just offer it. But during the pandemic, like, why not take your most vulnerable communities where, again, we're all at risk as investors and owners of interrupted payments. And so why wouldn't you, for $11, you're managing a multiple $1 million building. The way I kind of like it, you have a multiple $1 million building, you've got a $60,000 manager that's going to decide your fate, investor, owner. $60,000, that's salary, maybe it's $80,000, is ultimately going to decide the fate of your multi-million-dollar investment. Why wouldn't you spend $11 during a pandemic to call it insurance, call it resident retention insurance, to let residents know messaging that, hey, we're awake, we're here with you. Through the nonprofit, we can help you with resources. If you can't pay, or if you're having a hard time paying, let us help you with resources so that you can make that payment as best as possible. And then you ultimately have to decide, these are all tough decisions that we all have to make right now. And again, it still has to make sense. It's a business, but to your point, you can feel the difference of that approach, versus kind of, so I know some of the bigger ones, I think you mentioned to me, some of the largest eviction rates right now are coming from the big institutional things right now. And it's right now, we don't know. We think it's a good time. We think we've recovered, but there's still a lot of uncertainty. I don't know that that's the best play right now to be doing from a business standpoint.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that it goes back to like, it ultimately is that who's your consumer. So if you, and that's what I mean, I think you just see, is you see the lingo that guys in the business, they all use, like, it's fine. Like they're playing the game that they've had, but it's sort of that waking up and saying, wait a minute, to your point you'd made before we hit record, right? Like, I don't think that a lot of the constituents or stakeholders in the chain, whether they're the title insurance guys or the brokers who, brokered the deal and sold it,
contractors, all the vendors,
they don't realize that it was that $800 or $900 rent payment that enabled and powered the whole thing. So whether or not you realize it, that's your customer, right? Like I said, the person who goes on apartments.com at the library that's looking for a place that they can live that's somewhat affordable, they're a consumer, man. And so it is a product. And just from that, once again, if you want to go in and not be about foo-foo sort of, oh, this is all about, tugging at the heartstrings, it's like, well, they're your consumers, right? So if you love talking about how you're all about workforce housing, because what that really means is, I can generate like 50, I can do value add plays and generate 15x, 15% IRRs or whatever. I mean, I get it. That's freaking awesome, right? As an outcome, but it's just realizing that, well, maybe you could get 16 or 17. One, that's something to think about, right? Because you get the tenant in and you're not turning units over as much. And,
And as
you
we
do,
talked about, I mean,
yeah.
we're our partners and we're seeing over a 20% higher retention rate than our competition by simply having, these type of programs. So that's 20%. What's that? Well, I can tell you the math of what it's worth. The average turnaround, depending on what city you're in and how long it takes to turn it around, is between $7,500 and $15,000. And because it's not just the carpet and the paint, it's the downtime.
Yeah.
How much is that downtime? How much of your management time did it take? How many times did you have to show that apartment to somebody else? Did you pay a lease commission? So you take all those factors. A turn every year, which is a very typical in the South or Southwest on B and C properties, is very expensive. So why wouldn't you want to have a program to think about that, 15,000 a door on the high side? That's really expensive. Like, what if they stayed one more year because they knew their neighbor and had a connection, which is why we do resident councils. So again, instead of guessing what they want, we have resident council. And guess what? They're not asking for cheaper rent. Everyone's, oh, they're going to ask you for all these things. They're actually not asking us for like cheaper rent. They're asking us for really practical things. And a lot of times when you have a resident council, you know what happens? It's not the manager who's like telling you the problems. Like, you'll have like someone in your resident council saying, hey, that tenant who's been in there for 10 years is going through a health challenge, which is actually a real story that happened to us.
Yeah.
They're on eviction because some management company is just doing their job. And but it totally didn't make sense. It was like they were just waiting for their disability check and had nobody really representing them. And so the good news is it was a neighbor through a resident council who said, he's been here for 12 years. And this is just a timing thing. And of course, it all got fixed. And not only was it great for him, but why as an owner would I want to lose a great resident who's been paying rent for 10 years? Like, that makes no sense to me. And again, nobody's fault. It's just the way the system has been set up. To your point, Lance, because it's hard. We're managing a lot of units. There's a lot of problems. There are problem children. We had an arsonist, burn down one of our units. We had mental health issues, and that's a whole other story in Austin. We couldn't get rid of that person when we knew they were a danger to their neighbor. So there's really bad things that happen too. But most people are really good, and they really are good customers, and they just want a little bit of attention and focus, and just really messaging that they're being looked at and acknowledged.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I think that's just it. And just, you think about the resident council as an example. I mean, it's someone's opportunity. Just think about the translation, how that translates. Here they are, they're in that, that missing middle, right? But then they get a chance to sort of demonstrate some leadership, right? I mean, you think about it, like, that stuff feels good. Like, that's rewarding to that person.
It
right?
is.
And now they attach that rewarding experience. I was able to serve on the resident council in my apartment community of 150 or 200, 300 units, right? And I was able to help bring to the attention to management ownership that there's this guy who had a medical thing. Just think about how that made that feel. That guy felt like $1 million. He felt like he's on top of the world, I bet. Right?
He would have been homeless. He had no other place to go. If we would have let that go, if it wasn't caught by a resident, he would have been homeless. Over a 30-day payment, it was just 30 more days to get his thing processed. It happens. It happens. We partnered with a great group in the West Coast as well called Resident Relief. Great group, and they help try to avoid evictions from responsible residents who truly have gone through a health or economic disruption. It's not just someone who's being flaky, but a responsible resident. And they're doing such a great job. But to be honest, they need more money and more support. The nonprofit Veritas has been donating to them. We'd love to replicate it. That's a whole other thing. We're really focusing on services, but they're really trying to save those kind of residences. And actually, that story was ultimately, they were saved. We actually applied. The manager applied for a grant for rent. It was like a 60-day grant or a 35 or 60-day grant through Resident Relief. And that's how it got done, because the manager knew what to do. Because we had a resident council, a resident identified a vulnerable tenant. Because we had a management company that had been trained and knew there was resources out there to save responsible residents, and because we were ingrained and really learned about what's out there, we saved a resident. Which again, economically, I don't know the exact dollar amount it had for my investors as an owner, but I promise you, everybody wins in that transaction.
That's right. I mean, and I think that's just it. And it's just, I think many of us in the private sector, I always say, I catch myself saying it all the time. I'm like, I don't want to wait around for some government to try to solve my problems. Right. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like, that's the job of the private sector. It used to be the job of the churches and things. And I mean, well, once again, I'm not going to sit around and go, when are the churches going to get their act together and figure it out?
Right.
I can't do that. I got to say, well, what can I do?
Right.
Right. And I think that's just it. Things like that is that the performance of the asset can be higher. You can make more money and you can help people in the process. And it's not that much extra work, all things being equal. I think that's what we're trying to get through is that one, it's an awareness problem right now, right? Like, so we need to draw awareness to it, right? That it's not, because even right now, like the whole industry, how many emails I received this week about, ESG this and ESG that, and it sort of gets lost in translation. And unfortunately, some people, like some of the big boys in the financial institutions, they do take advantage of it. They find these programs that they can use to attract certain types of capital or whatever. And it's kind of hollow. Right. And I get it. It's frustrating. Right. And like, what the hell is ESG and what does that mean? And they've got the scoring and how do you keep track of it? And they're gaming the scores. And it's like, yeah, I mean, okay, it happens, but okay, it doesn't mean that you should just lose all its meaning because, you guys have the other thing. You guys really do a lot of the environmental stuff too. Once again, the environmental stuff can save you a ton of money, as you guys, many of the projects you've done have proven, right? And it's analytical. You can just do the math on it. It's got an ROI and, that one's pretty simple. And then the S and social impact, right? Like it's right in front of you. It's just,
I can tell anybody who owns apartment buildings or if you're an investor, the easiest money to make is on water savings. There's other things to do environmentally, but water savings, and it depends what weather system you're in the South, sun and, just easy things, even with just like film on the windows and clean filters. But if anything, most apartments that are 20 or 30 year old, they are incredibly inefficient, not only with just how much water they spray out in your shower head, there's so much leaking going on. And there's so much you can do to capture, like I'm talking millions of gallons. That also helps the resident by, 10 to 30 bucks, but it also helps the investor and the owner, because as you know, the way utilities work, it's you're splitting the cost of the utilities called RUBs, essentially. And so it is a win-win. I would just say to anybody, if they want more information, there's wonderful agencies out there that will help you. Look at your water savings, what you're burning right now. But I mean, in some of our buildings, we were like net 13 gallons. We were saving 13 million gallons, a year on one 300 unit building. 13 million gallons.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy. So, I mean these things, it's a different way of looking at it, because before everyone's sort of like, just power through it, and it is what it is, and that's the cost, and and then they're trying to do all this other crazy stuff to, which once again, go ahead.
The math on that one building, because I've done this, was 160,000 is what it cost us to put in the system. And then the water savings to the owners, forget what it did for the residents, forget about what it did for the residents, even that was amazing. We saved them about $28, I think, on average. We saved about $67,000 on our expenses went down. So what cap rate do you want to put that at? You want to put that at a 5 cap?
Yeah, do it. Yeah.
Well, at a 5 cap, the savings. You're saving over $1 million. I mean, it's about $1 million, $1.2 million plus of value added to the building by simply doing the right thing. Water savings.
Yeah, that's right. And now you can do the math on that. And if you're getting 20% carry on the deal, there's so for those of you that need to do the math to see why you should do these things, the math is there. It's arithmetic. On all this stuff, you just see that the turns in the 7,500 a turn apartment, you can get it. You can change the average, tenant in unit from 12 to 18 months or 24 months. So I think that's what's important, right? Like you look at some of these things, it's about how do you get people to stay in there more? And I think that in the workforce housing, the stuff that you think is awesome and you can make a bunch of money at, there's a lot of things that you can do that really aren't all that expensive. And I think that's really what it comes down to, is it's engaging someone like Veritas Impact Partners to kind of help you facilitate that communication and get those resident councils going and those sort of rent relief programs and the teledoc. I mean, these are real things like the benefits that come along with it to the tenant, I mean, it's a real amenity. Like you got free telehealth or whatever. That's freaking great. You don't even have health insurance, and now you've got some form of it or whatever.
Yeah.
So those things are there. It's just you've got, and this is awareness. We're bringing awareness to it right now. It does
I
exist.
promise you, the minute you lean in with some awareness, it's funny because you talk to a lot of people, and there's some people who are super interested, and there's some people who just like, they're still kind of in the world of like linear versus kind of like this all-inclusive, this much bigger kind of holistic, all-inclusive picture. And I'm telling you, I, it's some people, I get it. Like they'll hear this, they'll fall flat, they don't get it. They'll just do business as usual. But things are changing. So again, if they remember this or not, it's not going to matter because maybe we're on the early side of this, but not really, not as early as we think. I just sense it. And so right now, while as you said, ESG and all these things are in vogue, it's just the beginning. I mean, look what the president's doing right now with the kind of programs we're having. Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, agree or disagree, you're seeing a huge public works program. This is all part of the same kind of energy right now of trying to fortify America. And by the way, I would say no matter what political stance you take, it's really good for America and it's really good for democracy. If you believe in democracy, to have a vibrant middle class. We don't want a lower middle class that's falling behind to be that 41%. It's not good for economic stability. And I would even argue that maybe some of this instability and this partisanship, like you said, and that maybe, is being fueled by this kind of inequality. And again, when I say inequality, I'm not saying everyone needs to be equal. I'm just saying whoever your customer is, meet them there.
The disparity, and that's
the disparity. That's what it is.
I mean, everyone does romanticism back to the 1950s or whatever. Well, go back and look, and what you'll find is a robust middle class.
Yeah.
Right. So like, okay, it was a different time, but that's the thing. So what we're letting through some of these things is that the disparity is becoming too big. Right. Yeah. And so, like I say, they're big problems. There's all sorts of problems. I get it. There's tons of moving parts. Like, Lord knows, I'm not good at most things. I'm good at like 4 things. So, but what I do know is like, it's the little things. It's incremental. It's a bunch of stuff that you can do. And if everyone takes personal responsibility to do something, right, to lean in. And if that means that you got to tell yourself this is equal to like adding, internet that you can charge your tenants for to get $30 more, whatever you need to do to get your butt motivated to like take action, go for it. Right. Or if you are a bleeding heart and you like to do that and you're all about humanity and you want people to have better lives, that's freaking great too. Then that's why you should do it. Right. But the point is that everyone listening to this, you're a stakeholder in one way or another. You have a voice. Right. And if you're going to invest and think that investing in multifamily syndication is the greatest thing since sliced bread, then you have a voice. If you're the guy who's out there, trying to, call the brokers and find the next, value add, C to B deal or whatever, you have a voice. You can do something about it. You can take action, right? For me, like I can take action and I'm going to, right? Get the word out there and make this happen. It's just each one of us needs to take action. We do that. It becomes a better place. That's what makes this country great. We don't leave it up to someone else. We all get to do something about it.
Well, there's also something really fun. I find that if someone says, how do I start? I don't know anything about this or what have you. I really find that a lot of times setting your intention is the first thing to do. Saying, hey, I'm going to explain. I heard what they said. What's one thing, like to your point, that I could do? But I can tell you that the minute you start to set your intention, I think the biggest thing for Thrive was we were a very boring name. We were Principals Capital Funding. Like we had a very traditional private equity name. And it took a while for me to wake up to see the industry and also get at least financially successful. Where I felt, a lot of us are in survival mode. But once you get out of survival mode, it's like, I literally renamed the company Thrive FP because I had this grand vision, but not having any idea how I was going to do it. And I'm still a work in progress. Believe me, like there's still things that I'm getting better with every day. But what I find that happens is you just keep leaning into things that actually are going to create more money for you, better results, happier employees. Like it just all seems to keep like better deals. Like people come to you, they want to sell to you. Like it just keeps getting better and better. And my next idea, which I was going to share on this podcast, but I think I'll save it for the next one, is I have an idea of how to keep it would be a no cost way to keep your residents to want to stay for 3 to 5 years rather than 1 year. It's so obvious. But it came to me after a lot of years and years of just leaning in with some intention. And this is going to actually change. I think this is going to change our industry. And it's one thing, not one management company is doing this in the United States. If they would do this one thing, it would radically change retention rates in America.
This is
Radically.
great. Look at this tease, folks. It's like he's a pro. Now he does come from Hollywood. Like this is like this is let me give you this. Let me give you this. Till next time. On the next episode of Real Estate Risk Report. Yeah. No, that's great. No, yeah. So we're definitely having you back to hear about that. But I think for today, I mean, you get a sense. You listen to the first episode, you know, kind of the roots of where these guys came from. Humble guys, like you just recapped. I mean, you're like, hey, what can we do? You were on the ground, you saw it firsthand, right? Someone convicted you, you know, someone was there to sort of nudge you guys along, like we're doing to others right now.
Yeah.
That's how this happens.
Yeah.
Right. And it starts to sort of percolate inside of you. And then you start to take that first step. You set your intention and you just do that next one thing. That's all any of us can do. One thing.
It can be small.
It can be small, right? Small. So that's and the same thing with me. So you guys will, you know, after you hear the Friday episode or the third episode of this series with Jennifer, I told her, I said, I'm all in. And I basically went right to the website and I made my donation because that's what I can do. What could I do in that moment? What I could do in that moment is I could go to a website, punch in my credit card and hit, you know, submit.
Thank you.
Right? That's all it takes. Like, it's just, that's how you get started. So super exciting. Glad to have you on.
Thank you.
Once again, you can find JP, learn more about him and Adrian and crew at thrivefp.com. And I appreciate having you, man. It's going to be a great journey. One little thing at a time. We're going to do our part to change the world, our little world.
We really will. And if anybody is interested and wants to know more, you know, they can email you or however you want to, but I really want to support everyone's journey here. We're all colleagues. I think, and anything I can do to help support someone who's really interested in this, I'd love to be able to do that as well and offer any kind of advice that I can.
Cool. Very good. Thanks, JP.
Okay.
Take
Thank
care,
you
man.
so much.
Yep.